Call the meeting of the Lincoln Way 210 Board of Education to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome you to tonight's meeting. We are at our first time using board docs. That's quite exciting for all of us in our district as we move forward with this endeavor. I have a brief statement. For those of you who are Lincoln Way alumni, former and current Lincoln Way employees and friends, it is with sadness that I inform you that Mr. Jonas Lashman passed away this week. He passed away peacefully while sleeping. Mr. Lashman was the first staff member employed at Lincoln Way in preparation for the school's opening in 1954. He initially taught social studies and was the first head football coach for nearly a decade. He subsequently became a guidance counselor and then took over as principal at Lincoln Way Central until his retirement in 1986. The athletic field at Central was named in Mr. Lashman's honor when he retired. Those of us who knew Jonas are all deeply saddened by the loss of a truly great person. I would ask that you join me in a moment of silence to honor and remember Jonas, Mr. Lashman. Thank you very much. We have roll call.
Mrs. Glass.
Here.
Mr. Kozel.
Here.
Mr. Luchetti.
Here.
Mrs. Molinari.
Here.
Mr. Kirking.
Here.
Mr. Costick.
Here.
Mr. Lulo.
Here.
Thank you. We have one public comment, Mr. Ben Yamtub. I'd like to remind you that you will have 5 minutes to address the board. I will let you know when you have approached the 1 minute mark.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank all of you for your service and particularly thank the administrators for the tireless work they do keeping the district up and running on a day-to-day basis. Over the past couple of months, I've had the opportunity to learn more about the community and understand people's thoughts and people's feelings in terms of what's going on. And what I've been disappointed about is to learn about so many broken relationships, broken friendships, broken alliances that have come as a result of the difficult times that the district has faced. Being in the middle of a election season, it's a very difficult time to think about healing the community. But I'd like to urge Mr. Lulo and Ms. Glad specifically, and as well as anyone else running for the board, to be thinking ahead to April 5th, 2017. We need to begin the process of healing this community and bringing this community together. It's very important to remember that the name of this school district is Lincoln Way Community High School District number 210. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda. I'd like to have a motion for the consent agenda, which includes the approval of the December 15th, 2016 regular meeting minutes, approval of the disposition of closed session minute summary, approval of the payrolls from December 20th, 2016 and January 5th, 2017, approval of the Finance Building and Advisory Committee meeting minutes of December 6, 2016, out-of-state travel, and approval. That would be it. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion?
Just is out-of-state travel normally in the consent agenda?
No, and it's something we're going to continue to move up, and then I can take any questions if you may have. A number of our out-of-state travels wouldn't even need formal board approval. For instance, when we have our kids go to the dunes in Indiana and such, it's just something we've always put in whenever they leave state boundaries. With this particular travel, The students will miss one day of school. It's a competition they go to every year, so it would be my recommendation. I'll certainly be happy to discuss it at any time. But in looking, one of the things we did see in going through board docs and looking at other districts, this is a common practice to place it in the consent agenda. So as long as there's no objections, unless it's something completely out of the ordinary, we'll just continue this.
And Chris, I had the same question earlier on, and I called Scott about that, because on this out-of-state travel day of missing school kind of concerned me. But when you look at, you look at the supporting documentation and the curriculum it supports.
No, they're doing something educational.
Yeah,
I saw that.
It's an excellent.
I'm fine with it. I was just asking
Yeah.
about from the
Yeah.
procedural standpoint.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lax?
Aye.
Mr. Kozel?
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti?
Aye.
Mr. Kirking?
Aye.
Mr. Costick?
Aye.
Mr. Lulo?
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari?
Aye. Awards, presentations, and recognitions. Our student council president. Who would like to go first?
Oop. That's why I should have gone first. West Student Council is going through the finalizations of our TWERP process. That is one of the biggest parts of our second semester here. We have our theme days finally picked out. The first day is going to be a comfy clothes day, for everyone's favorite day. The second day will be an out-of-this-world crazy outfit day. By the way, the theme is Welcome to the Space Jam, both in a reference to the movie and also a space-themed dance. Wednesday will be a sports jersey day in regards to the actual movie. Thursday will be a space cowboy day. Due to popular demand, space cowboys are going to be fun. And then Friday is going to be a blackout, wear black kind of day. And then throughout the week, during lunch, we're going to be playing the movie Space Jam itself for all the students to watch during lunch, for those that haven't seen it, which include myself and anyone else that wants to enjoy it. And then finally, the twerp theme, or the twerp dance itself, will have a decorations committee of about 30 students working hard to make the school look awesome. Teamwork.
All right, I'm just going to do this. Okay. So as an entire school, Lincoln Way West is preparing for upcoming events. Our sports and activities are getting ready for our open house for the class of 2021, which we are very excited about. Also, Lincoln Way West is hosting a boys and girls varsity basketball game, where we'll sell t-shirts that with the little Chicago's W on it, and it'll have orange, obviously. And then lastly, we are in the process of developing a new club. It's a tutoring club where upperclassmen, like advanced upperclassmen, can come in after school and tutor the underclassmen with all the core subjects, from math, science, history, English, foreign language, anything that the students need help with. And in return, the seniors will be granted 1 hour of community service participation.
That's awesome. Thank you, Mitchell and Samantha. And I like that you have not seen Space Jam because you're not a child of the 90s and that's very popular. Great movie. You're going to like it, though. How about East?
Student council met last week and decided our twerp theme for twerp 2017 on Saturday, February 11th. Student council will be hosting twerp Hollywood. We will be meeting next week to decide our spirit days for that week. Last week, the juniors and seniors nominated seniors for the Mr. and Miss Griffin competition that will be held on Saturday, March 4th. The competition was created 8 years ago to award scholarships to Lincoln Way seniors. Since inception, we have awarded over 16,000 in scholarships to dozens of Lincoln Way students. The 5 senior boys and 5 senior girls that have been nominated by their peers are already working hard on their casual wear, formal wear, and talents as they will have to display on stage. We are looking forward to another successful event. I have been the stage manager for the event for the last 3 years at North, and it's a really fun night. A lot of the students look forward to it. And this year I'm fortunate enough to be nominated to be one of the 5 seniors. So I'm very excited, and I highly recommend coming out, but it does sell out fast, so get your tickets early.
Along with that, the St. Baldrick's Club is gearing up for its annual fundraising event during our February 3rd basketball game. Since inception, the St. Baldrick's organization has raised over $110,000 for childhood cancer grants. And so far, Mr. Jordan, Mr. McCreary, Mr. Beckett, and Mr. Pearson have volunteered to raise money and shave their heads in addition to some of our students as well. And along with that, last weekend, Lincoln Way East hosted the Central Northern Area FBLA Conference, where schools from all over the area came to compete in a variety of business competitions and activities. Students from all Lincoln Ways were recognized at the conference, getting medals for first, second, and third place. And especially 3 Lincoln Way East students won their election for the Central Northern Area officer positions as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Raj Riley. That's great. We have Central.
Just me again tonight.
Thanks, Calvin.
Yeah, exactly. Right now, our Lincoln Way Central Student Council is busy planning twerk, which is also on February 11th, similar to East. Our theme this year is a night in the city. Of course, we have to incorporate the night in any dance, any activity that we can. And this week we got into groups and brainstormed different decorations to decorate the school in the city theme for the dance. And we also took our theme days for Spirit Week to a vote, and those will be announced next week. And after twerk, we are going to be focusing on our Knight in Shining Armor and Frog Fashion Show, which is a night to honor some of our seniors. So we're excited.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Thank you all 5. You are truly the sunshine that has been missing in my bleak winter, so thank you very much. Curriculum and instruction update. Mr. Riley.
Yep. My apologies that I just can't quite go paperless. I'm working on it, but you've got a handout there. This is brand new. This is hot off the press yesterday. During the summer and early fall is when we find out about national rankings like Newsweek and Chicago Magazine and all those pieces. But the one that comes out in the middle of the winter is this niche website, and this is as well as we've scored here. It's a combination of information from our public report card, the 5 essentials. They look at a lot of data, and so on your sheet, and I'll put it up on the screen. 291 large school districts in Illinois. We are ranked number 1 as the safest place to go to school, and it's not. It is, some of it's building security, but a lot of it is just we have so few fights. We have so few of those serious discipline referrals. We have so few kids on long-term suspensions, and so that all plays into it. That's powerful for us. 4th rated, the 4th best high school district to go to as an athlete in terms of opportunities. Number 22 overall of 404 districts in Illinois. And then they also look at the Chicago area. Numbers are similar, but I put that one up there because in the Chicago area they have a rating on diversity, and it's the diversity of your student body, and we're 75 out of 82, and it's not a good or bad. It's a who we are, but we certainly need to address things for our students of different backgrounds, diverse ELO students, and we've got some good plans for that. So I thought that was interesting for us. If you go to this website, they actually put it on a report card, so you get a grade for academics. You can see the culture and diversity is the only thing that's not an A or an A+ down the line. Clubs and activities, the opportunities for kids. It really takes a lot of factors in, and I like this one a lot. The college readiness, A+. The students that are not just going to these schools, but are succeeding in some pretty high-powered schools. So we have kids at Harvard and we have kids at Stanford, but the bulk of our kids are still in the Midwest, and those are the kids that they survey. And U of I, an A+ school, our kids do very well there. So I think that's great. It was just a nice little extra recognition that we've gotten in the past, but we haven't been in that top 10 in these rankings. So really good for us. The heart of what I want to focus on tonight, and we've got our associate principals with us. The board goal that dealt with all the changes in assessment, we've talked on and off about that this year, but really we want to talk about what we've done specifically in the buildings to get kids ready for the SAT shift and the new college testing. But what I want to start with is just about 2-3 minutes on the transition of our 8th graders. We couldn't give that Explore test anymore, so we had to do a lot of training of our feeder schools, our incoming kids, our teachers, on what that PSAT 8-9 means. You know, that was our world in assessment last year. We got rid of the Park in high school, which has been great, but we've replaced that with the PSAT 8-9, which is our placement. It's also our freshman test. We're going to have a really nice 4-year way to track kids. PSAT 8-9 is 8th graders, as 9th graders. PSAT 10 is 10th graders, the regular SAT. That's what we want to see. We can track growth like we used to do with the ACT system, so that's good for us. 3 focus points to talk about again in just a few minutes. How we informed our feeder schools of the change, what we've shared with parents, and what we're doing with our parents and our faculty and students. So the fall of 8th grade into the fall of 9th grade, they take the 1 test, the 10th grade, and ultimately it culminates in the spring of their junior year. So informing our feeder schools, we have 2 main avenues. One is to get out to this group called the LWACC. It's all the curriculum directors from our 6 feeders, all of our private schools get together once a month. Our department chairs have done a fantastic job. They've gotten out the last 2 weeks, talked to all of the social science teachers, all of the English teachers. We just want to make sure we get this right when we're talking about our new placement test. In the packet that I gave you, there's a sheet that looks like this. Every parent of an incoming 8th grader will have this sheet, and they'll get it in the mail. They'll get it again the night that they come in. It explains what, and we don't even call them cut scores, they're recommendation scores. One of the strengths of this board, by the way, for years, has been giving parents the ability to waive students into a course. We don't have hard cut scores like a lot of districts do. Parents and teachers in junior high know their kids. They had a bad testing day, they have a right to waive them in. So this at least gives you the opportunity to see, here's what that score means. A score of a 52 gets them into honors, but any student can waive up to honors if they want the challenge. Social science, science, English, there's not a set piece of the test like there is on an ACT, so we took a social science score, a reading score, and the next page in your packet looks like this. Every junior high teacher, every junior high leader got a whole packet of information from us telling about every one of their students, how they scored in science, social science, and what the placement means. On the sheet that you have, the same as up there, if there's a Y in kind of a green shading under honors, they're yes, that's an honors recommendation. If it's a question mark, it means they're right on the border. Those are, the parents will have to have a conversation with students and decide, and they may not be recommended, but they can make that jump too if they feel like they're ready. So it was a ton of work. I want to give Brian Murphy and Amy Fury lots of credit. This was a ton of December and during break of organizing tons of data for 1,700 kids coming in, but they did a beautiful job. The letter, just so you know, the last page of the packet, the letter that the parents get looks like this. It has all the breakdowns in it. It says, here's your student's reading score, here's their writing score, here's our recommendation for English. Their reading score, their social science score, here's their recommendation for Western Civ. So I think it gives them a lot of data, a lot of information to get started. I think it's going to work very well for us. Last piece for me, and then I'll turn it over to the APs. Just very quickly, you've seen this before, but this is one of the best parts about going to this PSAT suite of assessments. Every parent gets a 4-page report, color-coded, how their students are doing nationally. So you can look at that little 19 in reading in the middle. It's in the yellow. It means they're kind of right in the middle. They're not meeting standards yet or what's expected to be college ready. And then down at the bottom, you have cross-test scores. How would they do in a high school social science class or science? The data is unbelievable compared to what we used to get on the ACT. So, and for me, the best part of it is reading, writing, and math. They get a separate page that says, how can my child improve? So if you got a 19, here's 15 things they need to work on. If you got a 21, here's 12 things to work on. It's just a great system. So I want to turn it over for a few minutes to our associate principals. Joe Scarbeck, Beth, and Ann, step on up, Joe. We could not do what we do in the buildings or district-wide without these 3 people. They've really come up through the ranks. They've taught, they've coached, they've been department chairs, and they really are the point person for a lot of what happens in their building.
Thank you, and thanks for having us tonight. We're excited to talk to you. As Tim talked about, we saw the SAT being the state test before the official announcement. We had the opportunities to talk to members and administrators from different districts and buildings, and we kind of talk about things we've heard and things we feel, and we kind of saw this coming. So it started a little bit last year, and then when the official announcement was made that the state of Illinois was going to the SAT, we felt really good about it. We get the APs get together with Dr. Fury and Mr. Riley quite often. And one of the things we really wanted to talk about was how do we inform our staff? How do we get the faculty to understand what's coming? And one of the biggest things that we use when we talk about professional development is the AM sessions. So one of the things we felt that we needed to address were kind of changing our faculty's understanding of what the SAT was. And so this was just a cover sheet. When we get together for staff development, we try and keep somewhat unified so we can keep the message all the same, but we tweak it a little bit to address different things that might be happening at a building. But I'm fairly certain all three buildings saw kind of something exactly like this in the month of October for Lincoln Way East, and it was talking about assessment literacy, a lot of what you just saw. One of the big things that we had to talk about was, for so long, and I can remember when I was in high school, but then, it's what we had in high school, so it's often like, oh, that's how it always is, and that's not true. Assessment has changed, it's a dynamic process, and so one of the things we knew that we had to talk about with our teachers, we had great help from the PPS department because they were kind of on this as well, is that SAT is not one of the things that often are thought of as like a coastal exam, and the Midwest really concentrates on the ACT. U of I, Indiana, Wisconsin, you can't get any more Midwest than that. They've always accepted the SAT. So we had to kind of get through that. That was just one of them. We also had to talk about how they were different, because they can look different. Now, one of the things that we are noticing is that as these tests evolve, they're actually kind of morphing into the same type of test. So we're kind of seeing that as some standards become more nationally based, we're seeing that kind of merging evolution. So for most of us, we're familiar with the ACT, the top score being a 36 and having 4 sections. Notice that there is a reading, science, math, and then the English writing portion. So now we have to get ready to the SAT. What's interesting about SAT is for a very long time, it was 1600 was the perfect score. Then they got crazy and changed it, and now they've changed it back to more traditional. Notice that the times are almost exactly the same now, at about 3 hours. But the SAT only has 2 sections, a math section and then a reading-writing section. And then what they have are specific questions in each one that allows them to talk about social science and science and give them a score like Tim talked about before. An example of how the tests are different, are a good one to just kind of highlight that is the essays. The SAT gives you like a fully written essay and then asks you to evaluate that essay, which is more than just writing it, right? You have to kind of get in depth with it. Where the ACT has you use a little more reasoning with their essay. I'm going to turn it over to Ann Shanahan. She's going to talk about how we take it even further.
So in addition to the morning AM sessions, we also start off right in the beginning of the year with discussing this with both our leadership teams and our teachers within the department meeting. So this is continuing with what we do with our faculty. So right away in August, right when we met with our leadership teams, we talked about what is the SAT going to mean for us and how we're going to make sure that our students were prepared. What does the test prep plan look like within our classrooms, and what can we also do outside of the school day for our students as well. Our leaders then bring that back to their departments, where even the first step was just getting familiar with the SAT test. Many of our teachers maybe have not seen one of those tests before, so they started right away with getting into what an actual SAT looks like. Our individual core department areas, they really dove in and focused, how does this impact their area? What are the strengths of our current curriculum? Is there any changes that we potentially need to make? And one example, it's not necessarily a change, but something just to highlight, our English department, for example, took the skill of a semicolon. Well, that certainly has always been in our curriculum. the use of a semicolon. But they really dug in deeper. How is, and if you saw, this is just the top of a handout that students would receive, how would a test that a student that's taking an ACT, what would a question look like that is testing the skill of a semicolon? And the students would see an example. How would that same skill be tested on the SAT? How would that question look the same or different? Again, same skill, not necessarily a change in the curriculum, but something that we wanted to highlight what the difference might be so that our students are prepared to take either test. And one thing that our department chairs were able to come up with was a minor difference between the ACT and the SAT, is that they found that the ACT oftentimes tests that skill alone. So can you or can you not utilize the semicolon correctly? Where an SAT question may combine that with another grammatical skill. So again, just making sure our students are exposed to those types of questions. And then, of course, we focus on we need to get our students also educated. So I'm going to shift over to what we're doing. And again, that started right away with the education of our students. Having them understand, because like Mr. Scarbeck talked about, a lot of our students really were not familiar with the SAT, had never taken an SAT before, knowing that yes, the test they're going to be taking can be used for college admissions. It can still provide scholarship opportunities for them. Knowing that this is the same test that's gone through College Board, and really getting them used to the new scoring. What does that mean? Our students are very well versed in what different ACT scores mean. If you say 21, they know what that means. A 25, a 30, they know what types of opportunities that means to them. But if you said, well, what's a 1300, they may or may not have been familiar with that. So that was getting that message to our students as well. And you can see highlighted there just the differences with the scoring to start to become familiar with. And then, again, making sure that they understand those same things that our faculty understands. That the SAT is the exam that Illinois selected. It is a College Board product, what that means. And Mrs. McNamara is going to talk about that. And then that all colleges take both, because that was often a misconception with our students. Would a college take either exam? And so making sure our students were educated about that.
So we encourage our students to take both the ACT and the SAT. And even though the content being assessed on both the SAT and the ACT is very similar, the format, the structure, and the way that content is assessed is different. So we communicated a suggested testing schedule that allows them to take all of these tests, but ultimately allows them to take these tests, but it also allows them to prepare and focus on one test at a time. So we encouraged our students to sign up for an ACT in February if they had not already taken an ACT, which would allow them to obtain an initial ACT score to just identify where they are at currently at the start of the semester. And then we're also going to encourage them to sign up for the June ACT at the end of the year to measure growth on the same test. Ultimately, that allows the students to then shift focus to the SAT, which they'll obviously be taking in April, and then after the SAT, they'll be able to shift their focus to AP testing in the first 2 weeks of May. So when we meet with the students, we not only talk to them about dates, but we also encourage them to pay attention to registration deadlines, because they do have to register online to, for example, for an ACT test. So it is important that we communicate this information to the students. We have and will continue to also educate our students about the similarities and differences, like what Mr. Starbeck talked about with the faculty, because it is important when the student goes and sits for whether it's an ACT or SAT, we want them to be as familiar as possible with that test. So bottom line is they're maximizing their success and walking away with the best score possible on that test. In terms of test prep, we tell students, if you don't do anything outside of just going to class on a daily basis, you're still getting very valuable test prep within the classroom. Our teachers do a great job of prepping our students for both the ACT and SAT just on a daily basis within the classroom. For example, the junior English teachers we'll provide our students with an ACT and an SAT writing prompt. And they'll go through that and explain the expectations and the scoring for each. Our math teachers are implementing SAT practice questions as bell ringers, just to get them familiar with the types of questions and the different formats that they'll start to see on the SAT test. So in addition to not only seeing it on a day-to-day basis within the curriculum, our teachers go above and beyond to provide our students with additional free test prep opportunities. And I tell students that this is an extremely valuable use of your time. We have teachers who are experts in their content area who are volunteering their time, and they have a valued interest in their success. And district-wide, we have teachers volunteering and going above and beyond to help our students on this test, which is fantastic. Now, moving forward to the SAT, the last thing we wanted to talk about and bring your attention to is the Khan Academy program. We're talking to our students and registering them for an account on Khan Academy, which is the official SAT practice. It is a fantastic resource that not only provides the students with a wide variety of practice tests, but it basically customizes or personalizes an SAT plan for the students. So even if they just logged on and started practicing a little bit, taking advantage of some of the quizzes and tests, basically Khan Academy looks at what they've done and provides recommendations for what to focus on in terms of strengths and weaknesses so they can maximize their score. Additionally, if the students took the PSAT test in the fall of this year, they can go through College Board and upload those scores. The PSAT is a practice test for the SAT, so they essentially could upload those scores into Khan Academy, and Khan Academy will analyze those scores and also provide recommendations for what to focus on and move forward as we look to improve our score. So it is a great resource for the students, and we are continuing to encourage the students to sign up and utilize it. And then lastly, if you're not going to do anything extra, the students are very tech savvy. They can download the daily practice app and wake up and just do an SAT practice question every morning. So if you're not doing anything outside of just the curriculum and within your classes, you can wake up and do a practice problem. And essentially they may not even realize that they are actually improving their chances on the test.
Yeah, they've done a great job. I can't tell you how tempted I was to throw a semicolon worksheet on the back for you. Thought better of it. All right, thanks.
Thank you. I just have one question. I'm very familiar with the ACT, like many of us are, and the testing and how that works. And there's many opportunities for the kids to take an ACT outside of the district. Is SAT the same way? Are those tests conducted the same way? You can sign up nearby?
About every 2 months, there's
Okay.
just like.
Just curious. Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see the direction the state is going to go the following year. Cross our fingers if they settle into something.
We like this one. I think it's a great benefit for us to do this systems.
Are we going to be tracking, if a student takes both, are we going to have the ability, or will we get that information to track, kind of see like, okay, ACT was here, SAT was here, or?
Yep, we have some of it already, but last year, I couldn't believe when we looked at it, only 40 students of our 1,700 testers took an SAT.
Yes.
We've been so ACT heavy, so after this year, we'll really have about half of the class. So.
Yeah. Well, unless you were going to the east or the west, you just stuck with the ACT and what you had. Thank you very much. Very, very informative. Moving on to action items. Presentation of invoices for December 2016. May I have a motion for those invoices, please?
So moved.
Second.
Hold on. We need a motion with that number.
Motion to approve the invoices in the amount of $1,666,311.03 dated January 19th.
2017. Thank you. Now may I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion.
I just have one question, Kelly, maybe you can answer it first. I noticed that there's a lot of bills that we had with an open purchase order, and I just want to, they were not necessarily huge, but there were several, and it looked new to me, and what are we doing to make sure that the control processes if it's an open purchase order? How does that all work?
So open purchase orders are mainly used for our operation and maintenance costs and our transportation costs, where we are buying a lot of items from the same vendors throughout the year. So my recommendation, especially with using our new software, because I don't believe that Rialto allowed for this, was to have our directors of buildings and grounds and of transportation open purchase orders with the vendors that they knew that they would be using throughout the year. And so what that does, basically, let's say we know that we're going to spend $100,000 on fuel. By opening the purchase order, it encumbers that full $100,000 out of the budget for the whole year. And then as invoices come in, we just pay off of the open purchase order. So it tracks the spending on that. So that we know that we're not overspending with that vendor and also overspending the budget. So that's basically how that works.
Nice.
Any other discussion, questions?
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Costick?
Aye.
Mr. Kosel?
Aye.
Mrs. Lass?
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti?
Aye.
Mr. Kirby?
Aye.
Mr. Lulo?
Aye.
Mrs. Molinaro?
Aye. Moving on to personnel, employment, please.
Good evening. Under employment, Jason Apollo has accepted the position of assistant boys tennis coach at Lincoln Way Central. Christy Gabriel has accepted the position of assistant cheer coach at Lincoln Way Central. Ed Grainauer has accepted the position of full-time bus driver in our transportation department. Matthew Murphy has accepted a position as a paraprofessional at Lincoln Way Central High School. Joel Palisard has accepted the position of PE Health Driver's Education Chairperson at Lincoln Way East High School, effective the beginning of the 2017-2018 school year. Marissa Rosandich has accepted the position of Girls Assistant Soccer Coach at Lincoln Way West High School. I ask the board to accept these employment recommendations as presented.
So moved. Second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lass?
Aye.
Mr. Kosel?
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti?
Aye.
Mr. Kirby?
Aye.
Mr. Costick?
Aye.
Mr. Lulo?
Aye.
Mrs. Molinaro?
Aye. Thank you. Employment, retirements, please. I'm sorry. Personnel retirements.
Under retirements, Patricia Tudko, art teacher at Lincoln Way East High School, is requesting to retire under TRS Option A, effective at the conclusion of the 2020-2021 school year. Margaret Jagger, physical education teacher at Lincoln Way Central, is requesting to retire under TRS Option A, effective at the conclusion of the 2020-2021 school year. I ask the board accept these retirements as presented.
Motion, please.
Move. Second.
Discussion. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lass?
Aye.
Mr. Kosel?
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti?
Aye.
Mr. Kirby?
Aye.
Mr. Costick?
Aye.
Mr. Lulo?
Aye.
Mrs. Molinaro?
Aye. Personnel report resignations, please.
Under resignation, Kim Orlick has resigned her position as a bus driver in our transportation department, effective January 10th, 2017. I ask the board to accept these recommendations as presented.
Motion to accept the resignations as presented, please. So moved. Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And other personnel, please.
Under other business, Katie Bowman, full-time professional, Lincoln Way Central High School, recommends for full-time employment status as she has successfully completed her 90-day probationary period. Heather Janelle, full-time paraprofessional, Lincoln Way Central High School, recommended for full-time employment status as she has successfully completed her 90-day probationary period. Haley Wafer, full-time paraprofessional, Lincoln Way East High School, recommended for full-time employment status as she has successfully completed her 90-day probationary period. And William Cologne, full-time bus driver, transportation department, recommended for full-time employment as he has has successfully completed his 90-day probationary period. As the board accept these full-time employment recommendations as presented.
Motion to accept, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lax? Aye. Mr. Kozel?
Aye.
Mr. Buchetti?
Aye.
Mr. Cookie?
Aye.
Mr. Costick?
Aye.
Mr. Lulo?
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari?
Aye. Treasurer's report. Thank you, Mr. Chappelle.
I'll begin with the treasurer's report. You recorded the memo found in your contents this evening. In terms of revenue, property taxes, this is a mid-year budget review. Property taxes are right in line with the budget as tax collection from the 2015 tax levy comes to an end. Tax revenue for the second half of the year will be from the 2016 levy that was approved in September. The budget factored $52 million in new construction for the 2016 levy. The latest estimate from Will County had the district at $64 million. That equates to an additional $100,000 in operating tax revenue over the budgeted figures. Property taxes that are local revenue comprise 71.2% of the total budget, operating budget revenue. Other local revenue for food service, student fees, transportation make up an additional 15.7% of the total operating budget. Therefore, local revenues for the district are right at about 87%. There are no major concerns with the local revenue budget as we seem to be tracking at this time. Second largest source of revenue is 7.9% from transportation. Those are fees in and expenditures out. We're right on budget with that. The district's total state aid budget among all operating funds is $9.5 million, with $5.3 in general state aid and $4.2 from reimbursements for mandated categorical expenses. The state has made its general state aid payments on time. However, the mandated categoricals are behind. As you can see, the chart illustrates what we've received at this point. All the special ed payments listed are payments that were due in the previous fiscal year ending June 30, 2016. State payments are reimbursements for expenditures from the previous fiscal year to be distributed quarterly to schools by the comptroller. The special ed payments we've received are reimbursements from expenditures from the 2015 fiscal year. Except for driver's education, we have not received any reimbursements to date for expenditures from the 16 previous fiscal year. Federal aid is typically more timely than state aid. There's been a delay in federal reimbursement process. Should get back in track over the next couple of months and remedy itself by the end of June. Expenditures, there are no major concerns on the expenditure side. In fact, we could end the year up to 3% under budget, which could offset the potential shortfall from mandated categorical state aid payments. With the fiscal year half complete, we've expended 48.5% of the operational budget. If the second half mirrors the first, we would end the year expending 97% of the budget. Three areas we've expended over 50% of the operating budget. Some of those have been discussed in these meetings. Purchase services is at 52.7% for two reasons. School bus lease payments for the year are made in July and August. We've also recategorized copier payments from capital outlay to purchase services this month. Special education tuition is at 58%, which is normal. Property revenue is predominantly tuition from the member districts. Those are paid in advance, and the expenditures before the expenditures, so they have adequate cash flow. Dues and fees is at 57% due to driver's ed fee reimbursements made in July and August. In summary, the district is on track to end the year with a surplus, even though state revenue could be as much as $2 million less than budgeted if we only received 2 of the 4 budgeted quarterly payments. Potential loss in state revenue could be offset by expenditures coming in as much as 3% under budget, enabling the district to end the fiscal year with an operating surplus. We project that the minimum surplus will be approximately $1 million. If we receive all the budgeted state revenue, the surplus could reach approximately $4 million. So certainly we're trending in the right direction. In terms of the treasurer's report itself, if you go to the total operating expense, once again, we are at 8.4% year-to-date less expenditures from the previous fiscal year. So we continue to trend on that positive course. Kelly's available to answer any questions or any concerns that you may have. On a separate note, we have borrowed 14 million of the first 20 million of tax anticipation warrants. We will receive an additional 6 million overnight tomorrow morning. We should be in position then to get through February, looking to potentially borrow an additional 3 million if necessary in March.
So 14 and 20, borrowing 6, plus another 300.
Possibly another 2, depending on cash flows, what we receive from the state. As we've discussed, we're in a position where we do have fund balances right now in our insurance, and so we will. The plan is to not make the next couple of monthly payments, and those are about $700,000 apiece, I believe, Kelly, about $700,000. Our current balance is $4 million in our insurance fund. We will then pay those back by the end of the fiscal year. The plan at this time is to go ahead and show them on the expenditure side or the check, and then make those payments by the close of the fiscal year.
Okay, I'm going to get a motion on the table to approve the treasurer's report for December 2016, please. A motion, please.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second?
Thank you. Now we may proceed with discussion. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
When you say the 3 million, that we have approval from the bank for an additional 3 million?
Correct.
Just 3?
Just as we have the 6, approval for 3, with the money we have in our insurance fund, we'll be able to make it through the fiscal year.
But the additional amount of credit available after the 6 is drawn
Is
3
3
more.
more. Correct.
And then you're anticipating drawing all that in March.
I'm not anticipating. We have the ability to, if we need to. We will continue to track month by month. We looked at an analysis today. Depending upon what happens with the state, even if we receive no more categoricals, with the 3 million and the money we have in the insurance fund, it'll get us through the fiscal year. Our hope would be to not have to draw that additional 3 million. Now, I believe we'll have to draw possibly $1 million and a half of it, but you know, the less we can borrow right now, the better.
What's the typical balance in the insurance fund that we feel that we can
Well,
borrow from it?
the typical balance is a good question, Chris. When I started as superintendent, it was negative. So the fact that we have $4 million in there now, that's a very strong balance. In talking with our agent, he feels 1 to 2 million is more than sufficient as our bills as we pay $700,000 a month. So as long as we're in that $1 to $2 million range, right now we're in good shape. Over the past several months, as $700,000 has been going in, our bills going out have been less than that, so we've been building on that balance. But certainly you want to have a positive balance.
And you said by delaying these two $700,000 payments, is there any significant cost as a result of delaying?
No, it's our money.
All right.
And so it's our money within that cooperative.
Okay.
So no penalties, no cost. You know, as long as the other members of the insurance affiliation aren't supporting our balance, they're okay. And so we don't want to get in a situation where their funds are covering our negative balance. So we would, you know, I would never consider going below $1 million right now with as many employees as we have.
But the plan is to make those payments, not
Close the fiscal year, correct. Yes,
in
by
the
the
fiscal
close of the
year.
fiscal year, correct. So that you know, that balance is whole at the close of the fiscal year.
The balance is whole at what level? What's your target level?
Well, in terms of paying that back, Joe. So we wouldn't want to carry over the fiscal year owing our fund money.
I understand.
Okay, so that surplus, if you will, that balance will then help with rates next year, the year after, anything that may be unforeseen. We didn't see a rate increase this year, and that was due to the fact the movement of the Blue Cross to Blue Shield was a very good move for the district. We also, last year, had a very healthy year. We were able to build up our fund balances a little bit. So that allowed us to see no increase. Keep in mind that the district, the board, pays 75% of those costs, 25% then by the employees. So if we keep that at zero, that's a good number for both the district and the employees.
One more quick
Yes.
question, now unrelated to the direct charge of the board. When do we get a first draft of the 17-18 budget?
Well, draft, yeah, I know.
I'm going to keep us back to the agenda, if you don't mind. I'm sorry, but we are.
We can discuss that at the end of it, we can discuss that then at the end of the meeting.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Did we, so in December, in other revenue, we had a receipt of $453,000, and our total budget for the year is $520,000. We're going to look into what that was.
Go ahead, that was reconciliation.
So, since we participate in the 843, District 843, essentially a co-op, there's a reconciliation that is done every year to reconcile their actual cost of the payments that their districts, the districts that they serve, made. So we received, actually it was just under $600,000 check from them for our FY16 costs that we paid to District 843. It was a little later than I would have expected. Usually the true-ups happen a little bit more quickly than that, but they've been experiencing a large amount of turnover at 843. It's also a little bit larger than we would typically expect as far as a true-up. I inquired about that, and the reasoning that I received was that they, 843, since they bill us based off of a budget, their budget was much higher, and then through the course of last year, they cut costs in their programs, and then never did like a mid-year true-up. So we were just paying a lot more than what their budget and what their actual costs were for the year. And this, unfortunately, with private facilities and special ed cooperatives, it's kind of the nature of the beast sometimes. But it's not something that we necessarily planned on receiving. But
if that's good for us, it worked in our favor.
Right, exactly.
I'm concerned about what happens if that wouldn't have been the case, and is there any way that they can track a little bit? You said that they were short-handed.
Yes,
but
so I inquired with their new business manager, and she will be completing a true-up. First of all, their budget was much more in line with what they expect their actual costs to be this year. And then she will be performing a true-up as of the end of December. So I plan on following up with her in the next couple of weeks just to see where they're at, and if they experience any large fluctuations from what they had budgeted for. My initial conversations with her was that, they're pretty much tracking according to budget right now, but I'll certainly be following up with her in the next couple of weeks to see how that true-up is progressing.
Kelly, also, I believe it's going to be quarterly is what the goal for 843 is.
Yes.
As opposed to having it at the end of the year.
Right.
Quarterly true-up?
Reconciliation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Their new business manager is implementing some good practices and procedures.
It's a work in progress. That's the goal.
anything further?
Yeah, I do want to go back to the state aid payments for a second. And looking at our budgeted amount for 2017, it is $9.5 million, so it's made up of a $5.3 million in general state aid and the $4.2 million in mandated carried rural expenses. Is that 4.2 million what we were expecting for 2017?
Yes, it's based on 4 payments. It was the 4th payment from 2016 that they owed us, and then 3 payments of our 3 payments of our 2016 expenditures, if that makes sense.
So if we received $1 million, even though this was categorized from previous periods, we really received a quarter of that the state categoricals that we were budgeting for.
Correct.
So when you say the low end of the range, the low end of our potential surplus is $1 million, but if we receive 2 of 4 payments, are you counting?
2 of 4 payments.
From 2017, or are you including this payment?
No. Two of the, if we receive 2 of the 4.2, we'll be at $1 million surplus. That's the way I understand this. Kelly, that's the way I understand this. And so if we receive 3 or 4, that's even better. But we only budgeted for 4, knowing that potentially they owe us 5. We're not going to see that.
No, they very rarely pay 5.
Yes.
In 1 year. And with the 4th payment from last year coming so late, I would be very surprised if we received 4 total payments in this fiscal year.
So if we receive 2 of those budgeted, we'll have $1 million surplus.
And do you consider us to really received 1 at this point?
Yes. Okay, correct. One of the
So,
budgeted.
because that wasn't how I kind of understood it at the finance meeting. But, so this is like one payment. You're saying at the low end we would expect just one more payment category.
Yeah. I can't imagine them only giving one categorical for the entire fiscal year. 2 would be at the low end, but that's quite possible right now.
Anything further? Roll call, second discussion. All right, roll call, please.
Mrs. Black?
Aye.
Mr. Kozel?
Aye.
Mr. Luchetti?
Aye.
Mr. Cookie?
Aye.
Mr. Costick?
Aye.
Mr. Lulo?
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari?
Aye. Approval of the student activities report for December 26th. May I have a motion, please? So moved. Second?
Second?
Discussion. You may not present. Are there any questions?
Well,
Okay.
I just want to say,
Sorry,
compliment Kelly and say thank you that what you have done in terms of cleaning up is something that's been long overdue. And it's really impressive how it's been cleaned up and no negative balances. That's music to my ears for many, many years.
Work in progress, right?
Yeah.
Very well done. It's a huge project.
Thank you.
Very good. Very good.
And it's nice to see the narrative go with it, to see what you did with what, and, you know, it's very clear, it didn't require
Well done.
5 phone calls to figure out what's going on. It was read this, and it was really right there. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, so my student activity report is in 2 parts tonight. The first part is just our typical report on our student activity summary for the month ended December 31st, 2016. We had a student activity fund balance of $2,298,878.11, with revenues of $392,522.44, and expenditures of $592,940.15. You also see that I made the adjustment for the $115,566 that was transferred from our ed fund as part of our audit entry for, we discussed it last month with our auditors recommended, and we absolutely agreed that the land that was purchased out of student activities should never have been purchased out of student activities, and that land should be moved over to ed fund, which is what we did, and we had to transfer an additional $115,000 back to student activities in order to accomplish that. So that was also done in the month of December. I've attached the journal entry support that I did for that. So I don't know if there's any questions about this or if we should move on to the
questions on this portion?
So this was one of the adjusting journal entries from the previous fiscal year?
Yeah, yes, yes.
Yeah, so this was in like the letter from the auditor?
Correct.
Covered, okay.
Correct. So
And
last
how-
month, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It was, so last month, we, actually not last month, our balances that we've been reporting, our beginning fund balances that we've been reporting accounted for that $115,000. Interest then needed to be made on student activity side, so that's what was done in December to adjust the beginning, it was the beginning balances that were adjusted.
Yeah, it was journal entry 15 on the report. Now, when we look at this backup material that you provided, I mean, how did you decide the accounts that you were going to put the money back into on the student activities side?
Well, I had to put the money somewhere. Pretty much all of these accounts, as we'll talk about in a few minutes in my student activity analysis, were not, according to the definition of student activities, were not in accordance of actual student activities in accordance with the definition of student activities in the Illinois Administrative Code. So you'll see that I put $87,000 back in the Superintendent Emergency Fund. But then you'll see in my analysis that I'm recommending that we close it. So I wanted to make it as clean as possible in the paper trail, in the clean paper trail to show that it's two distinct, separate entries. So I put the money back in Superintendent Emergency Fund and then taking it out in my recommendation to close it because it's not an actual student activity account. For the balances where you know, there were some small residual balances in some of the North accounts. According to the Illinois Administrative Code, if an account is discontinued, the board does have the ability to transfer it to another student activity account or to district funds. But I did put some of those residual balances, I actually moved them to the corresponding East account, just to be consistent with what we did with the remaining North balances. I believe that was done in October.
So,
but out of all of this, I think, I don't have the calculation here, I think it's 113,000. Over 113,000 of the 115,000 is then part of my next report where I'm saying that I think that those accounts need to be closed and those balances need to be moved back to the educational fund.
right, so I mean, what I was looking for, the tie-in being, you moved it back into the North accounts that were still existing activities, like North boys basketball, cross country, football, but into accounts where you have that you're going to come up and say aren't necessarily student activity accounts, like North PE rental,
right,
students which you're closing also the Central, and you're recommending to close also the Central and the West. You did not move it back into.
Right.
So that was kind of the methodology that I see.
Exactly, because those aren't student activities. They should have never been accounted for as student activities to begin with. So. Okay. So moving on to the activity fund account analysis that I've been completing over the course of the last couple of months. This was done, you know, in two-part, just looking at the accounts. I think it's always good to analyze student activity accounts, especially me coming in as new and just trying to learn about district operations. But then we also had a finding on our fiscal year 2016 audit that said that certain district activities being recorded in student activity funds. So as part of our audit matrix our audit finding matrix that we're tracking, I had said that I was going to do an analysis of this and report to the board in January what my findings were. So this is what this is. I've included a definition of what a student activity account is. I'll just read it just so that everyone's aware. Funds owned, operated, and managed by organizations, clubs, or associations within the student body under the guidance and direction of one or more staff members for educational, recreational, or cultural purposes. Examples: homeroom, yearbook, class year, choral or band group, class projects, student clubs, student council, student-sponsored bookstore. My report's divided into essentially 4 separate parts. The attachment A that's included with your report really is the one that addresses the audit finding, and those are the reports that I've identified through my research. And by research, I mean I really went back into Rialto. I looked at all of the accounts, looked at what the sources of revenue were, what the expenditures were. I talked with the administration, or student activity coordinators, and department chairs and various people just to really learn about what all of these student activity accounts were. So attachment A basically lists all of the accounts that I'm recommending that we close and move the funds to our educational fund. Now, to be clear, we're not taking money away from students. We're not taking money away from students here. It's just really a change in how we're accounting for them. These are curricular items. They really should just fall under our budget and be part of our educational fund and not be accounted for as a student activity because they do not meet the definition of student activity.
Is it still your intention, though, for an easy one out here, PE suit rentals, to have some sort of sub-account under education to track it still, or are you just?
No, so what's going to have to happen now going forward is, what can I use as an example here? Gym suit sales is a good example. So we charge students to buy a gym uniform, and then the district purchase of those gym uniforms in order to have an inventory is paid out of student activity. So what we're going to have to do is set up an account in the general ledger side to record that revenue, as it'll be like other local revenue, student fee, other local revenue, and then the expenditure will be accounted in my previous district. I've set up the PE budget. So our budgets will need to be adjusted in order, not so much this year, because we're doing this halfway through the year. We might have to do a little bit of adjusting of budgets for the remainder of the fiscal year, but next year all of this will need to be accounted for in our budget.
And that's fine. My concern was, as we've always tracked, even where they were, it was very easy to see money in, money out on that one niche of things. And now, if we're moving into education fund, which has got a lot of moving parts, to still be able to track that we're not throwing money away in some.
No, it'll have its own separate account, and we'll be able to track the revenues and expenditures as such. The second part of my report, although it really wasn't part of the audit finding, it's just things that I found when I was going through the student activity fund. There are accounts that were set up, I think, as just more convenience to track. They certainly support student activities within each building, but they were just set up as separate because sometimes it's just easier to track outside of a big account. I'm just recommending that since they're not in and of themselves student activities, that we close those accounts and combine them with the account that they're supporting. So attachment B includes the original account and then the account that we would transfer them to, along with the total balance that would be transferred. And these balances might fluctuate a little bit when we actually do this over the course of the next couple of weeks, if the board recommends that we do this tonight. But this was just in general to give you an idea of what those account balances are.
So one of the ones you closed, so you're recommending combining these and putting them into a other student activities account? Is that accurate?
Yes.
Right.
So there's a, yes,
So one of them's football apparel.
right.
Well, I guess that's an extracurricular. Okay, never mind. I'm thinking of
So
the
just
heritage
go
and gym
football.
suits. Okay, I'm not gonna recur anymore.
It's not going to the other, it's going to something, so band uniforms, West is just going to the band, the general band
Band.
West account. So it's, they must have something just to buy their uniform.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they have that on these. My question is the couple that are the IHSA fees,
Mhm.
because I see those normally going through the regular general checking account. I see a lot of fees for that kind of stuff.
IHSA fees are specific to regional, sectional, super sectionals that Lincoln Way chooses to host. They're not normal athletic entry fees. And this account also encompasses the large tournaments that are not necessarily IHSA, but the large tournaments that the various sports clubs sports teams, put on in order to, it's a fundraising for them in order to buy equipment and things like that they need for their teams. Okay, moving on to the next part, attachment C. This is really just some account names that I'm recommending, either through discussion with administration or just things that I saw that that we changed the original account name to a new account name. The one like football coaches, I just think that when you see football coaches, that implies that it's the football coaches' money, which is not the case. It's actually the football teams using that money. So I'm just recommending that we remove the word coaches from the description just to make it clear.
Makes sense.
And is there any difference in east, central to west as far as the names? I mean, I assume they're pretty similar, but there's probably some subtle differences between the schools.
There's some subtle differences. There's some clubs that are at one school and they just may not have the interest in another school. So there are
But
some
For
differences.
the most part, though, you've got them standardized, and it kind of looks like the naming conventions. You're trying to get it all the same. So
Yes, yeah, and you can see too that if you look at that, so the account numbers in Skyward, you see that 97Q100, and then that 4-digit number that follows that. You'll see that those are often, about 90% of the time, they're consistent across the 3 schools. So if you wanted to look at what the football account was at East Central and West, it's all the old 415 account.
Okay. Yeah, that makes it easier to sort.
And then finally, the last part of my report is just other information. I think these are things that we need to continue to address and look at going forward. And I'm looking for a recommendation on one part of this as to how you would like to proceed. The first part of this is attachment D. You see that we have a lot of non-current class of accounts. And Dr. Tingley and I are currently, we're working with our attorney just to see what our options are with these accounts. And we have some accounts, especially at Central, obviously, that houses the majority of them, dating back to the 80s, that have balances. I know that a class will contact us sometimes and use that, and they look for that money to be used as a startup essentially for their class reunion. So I've put a couple different options of what we can pursue, and that's, again, we're looking for this to be reviewed by our attorney as well, but we can continue with our current practice. We could contact alumni from these classes to see if they would like their balance paid out. We don't ever pay out to a person, is my understanding. We always pay out to a class of account that has already been set up at a bank. But since they have been inactive for some time now, it is at the board's discretion, I believe, again, this is to be confirmed by our attorney, to transfer the balances as we see fit. We do, another thing to think about is that we have a lot of our classes who donate, obviously, items to our buildings. And sometimes those items break and they need to be repaired. So that's another thing that some of these balances are used for at times. But again, if that's going to be the case, then that should probably come out of our O&M fund, since it's not part of our building to repair it. So this is something that we'll bring back to you, and but if you want to discuss anything with it tonight, we can.
You said legal's looking at it too?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to say, like, let's see what they say.
See what options we have there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very complex to contact the alumni and ask them for
Right.
positions.
Yeah.
Right.
And then finally, you'll notice that we have our booster clubs underneath our student activity umbrella. There are a lot of school districts that do this, but there are a lot of school districts that also require their booster clubs to become 501c3s, and then they account for their financial activity outside of school district, outside of the school district umbrella. If you look at our balances at the end of December, our booster balances across the 3 schools for athletic and music are $481,000 of our $2.3 million, so that's approximately 21%. Regardless, if they're under our umbrella or they're on 501c3s, they would still have to operate in accordance with board policy 890, parent organizations and booster clubs. It's something, in my previous district, our booster clubs were not part of our student activity fund. It's something that would be, we could at least pursue. I did talk to members of at least the music boosters at each of our 3 schools who were interested in exploring this option. So I wanted to see what the board's interest was. And
What is the positive in separating and pros and the cons that you see?
The pros that I see is that it would eliminate a lot of activity from just our bookkeeping department and free up resources to do other things. We're basically their bank right now. We cut all their checks, we make all their deposits. We do review, I do see what they're spending, but again, I think it would just eliminate our banking that we're doing for them. The con is you do have a little bit, although they still need to operate under the board policy, you do have a little bit less control, per se. We could require audits.
But
also, if we're doing audits and they have to do all that paperwork, it's, correct me if I'm wrong, that'd be an expense on those boosters, so therefore there might be less of their money to be able to put towards what we're raising money for.
Correct.
So it's a back end
What, so it's 20% of the money, but what percentage of the actual transactions that our bookkeepers are doing are coming from these accounts?
So I did do that. I ran a check register from last year and then just looked at total checks that came out of all of their accounts, and I wish I had that number in front of me. I'm sorry, it was one of the first things that I did. I should have brought it tonight, but I want to say it was over 50% of the transactions.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it makes, especially if they're willing to consider, I think this definitely makes sense to pursue further. I mean, whenever I think about it, I always think those organizations are kind of 501c3 organizations.
Yeah, and we are not approving their expenses.
No, they're doing that through their own meetings and their own.
We're just their bookkeeping. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in some cases, when they overdraw, you become their line of credit.
Right.
That we can have.
Probably in the cases we want to do.
I would
No, but we do also protect the students as there's turnover from year to year to year. And something historically Lincoln has always done. That's not always a good thing or a bad thing. It's just what we have.
It definitely would require a lot more research. I just wanted to bring it up preliminarily tonight to see if it was worth pursuing.
People can pretty much something.
there's a lot of transaction.
Do you plan to reach out to the athletic group?
I will.
Okay.
I guess the only question, one big question that comes to mind, if we do see this control these accounts and they overdraw either somebody fraudulent by fraud or by accident, does that change our liability as a district to these clubs, as opposed to when we're doing the bookkeeping? That would be my only concern.
Because if they're going to have to be, if they're liable to have to do taxes and everything else, and if they don't get filed, are we on the hook for it?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, our name is always on the hook, let's be realistic here, even if it's not that we're holding on to that, that's still, you know.
They're on 501(c). It's just a question. It's, like I said, it's.
I think we need a lot more information. I appreciate you bringing it up. It's a nice, different way to look at it.
I know one of the problems, like the boosters were having, is they couldn't use one of those little credit card swipes because they can't set up their own account. And if they were, they might be able to, you know, just expand what they can sell at the football game. So, I mean, I think it's worth exploring.
50% of transactions.
Yeah.
Nice done.
I had one more question.
Go ahead.
When you went through these and determined which accounts met the definition, did anybody else review that and agree, disagree? And will that be done on a regular basis? Or is there a process now to set up a new student activities account? How will we stop this from getting to be 80?
Right.
Again?
So a couple different answers. I did.
Lot of questions.
I went through, identified the accounts that I thought, and then had meetings with the building principals, student activity coordinators, athletic directors, and just determined if my understanding was correct. I have said that if there is a new club that, or activity account that they would like to open, that I will bring those to the board every month and include that as part of my top sheet, so that you're approving and seeing any new accounts that are open. And I do plan on reviewing this pretty frequently.
But, sorry, I had a few more, and this is on attachment A. So, I mean, I understand, you know, caps and gowns and gym suit sales and everything like that. That's, you know, we were buying something, the students were selling it, and it was running through student activities account. What about, do we make sure that in these accounts like superintendent emergency fund, and actually if you could tell me what aquatics, I mean, that's a large one here. Aquatics had $87,000 distributed this year. I mean, what was running through that?
So that's really all of our swim lessons and our bathing suit purchases that we purchased. So that's kind of in conjunction with PE that are, so that's just our whole community aquatics program, along with our swimsuit purchases for PE.
And then auditoriums.
Auditorium is basically the cost that it takes to run our auditorium, and then any rentals that organizations are using our auditorium have been booked into here. And that's really, it should just be a budgeted account. We should give our auditorium director a budget, and our rentals should be, all of our rental revenue should run through the district.
So you reviewed where all the money was coming into these accounts. You think they all should be on the district's books?
Yes.
And for the ones that are, so for the disbursements that have already been made in 16, 17, are we going to be making entries to make sure that for audit purposes, those are not going to show up on the student activity accounts for this year?
Correct. The cash is gone, so what's gonna happen is, I think I referenced this in my memo, there was an adjusting journal entry that our auditors proposed. It was number 18. I know that you probably don't have that in front of you, but if you wanted to look at it, what I'll do basically is gross up our revenues and our expenditures, so it's gonna have a zero net effect. but it'll at least show the expenditures and the revenues that have been recorded this year on the student activities side, and I will show those on the ed fund.
And the last ones that I don't understand, I just want to make sure.
Sure.
The foundation calendars, there's 3 accounts. What were those being used for?
Those were, basically those were the sales of the calendars, correct? I'm sorry, I don't remember that one off the top of my head with that. That might, it's not a student activity account, it needs to be closed. I think that what I'll do is contact that foundation and then just determine when we can move the money to them, because that might not be our money.
That's what I was trying to get at.
It's like we're coming off registration and still in the hole.
Right.
As I'm trying to figure out, I mean, there's disbursements being made from these accounts, so.
One other question, as you were talking about doing this, breaking some of these Office of 503, if they're separate entity, would they, as you speak with legal for transparency, would they still be FOIA, their records still be FOIA? Because that's just a question I think you should ask, because if we're taking $400,000 we throw out between those big booster groups, now we're going to throw it into organizations where the community, who's really the money belongs to, can't. I would still want to have that transparency there.
Okay, I can ask that. I don't know that answer right now, but.
Anything further? So the motion will be approved student activities report with adjustments as presented. May I have a motion for change?
So
Second? Second. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Well, I'm just going to, the adjustment meaning these 3 foundation accounts are not included.
Everything that we just discussed with the A and the B. A and B only.
Now, we have the foundation disbursements in there, correct, Kelly?
Well, they're on there right now.
I do have them in there. I still think that we should close the account. It's just, I can report back next month with the.
moving the money out.
So we broke the adjustments for the adjustment A and A attachment
Do we want, I mean, if it's foundation money, do we want to be moving it back into the ed fund? I mean, why don't we just leave it there and then have it, make the adjustment there?
Well, we could.
Now, twice, yeah, I mean, why, yeah, I mean, it's just.
Whatever is
Kelly,
the cleanest.
as the,
Exactly.
now correct me if I'm wrong, the adjustments will be made.
The adjustments have not been made. They will be made, so what we can do is.
So as long as it's the appropriate adjustment to close out the account, we're okay with the motion. You see what I'm saying, Chris? So if the motion is to close these accounts. So if we determine that these 2 need to go to the foundation, it can be closed out.
Right, we can move the money directly from student activities to the
And then
foundation.
we will have, when we report back the next month after all of this has been done, and we'll let you know which direction that was moved.
We could close the account.
Close the accounts.
That's the motion to close the accounts on Appendix B. Let's just have clarity here. Attachment B, we are transferring to other student activity accounts to clean that up with some specific naming of those accounts. And then attachment C is the description to the name change on some of those accounts. And attachment D, the class year accounts, we're going to have some clarification of that. Not included. Not included.
Right, nothing.
Attachment A, B, and C is the motion to approve those student activities accounts as presented. So the motion still stands with who had the motion? I did. And who had the second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Flax. Aye. Mr. Kozel.
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti.
Aye.
Mr. Perkins.
Aye.
Mr. Costick.
Aye.
Mr. Lulo.
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari.
Aye.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you so
Yes.
much. Well done.
Thank you.
Very much.
Approval of the independent contractor agreement for on-site childcare.
You have in your backup materials copy of an independent contractor agreement. There's been some discussion between myself and Aunt Nancy's. We have added some additional language as recommended at our last meeting in terms of notification of DCFS reports. We ask that we receive those within 1 week of them receiving the report from DCFS. That gives us the opportunity to, if it's a building issue, a facilities issue, we would be able to address that immediately. That's something that's not a problem and something that they share with us regularly, but it's good to have it in writing. Also identification of their employees, that they wear a name badge, lanyard, something to identify their employees separate than Lincoln Way employees. I had discussions in terms of possibly increasing rates and increasing the remittance to the district. They were not interested in any of those types of scenarios. Their belief would be as they increase rates, they may lose clients, which would then inhibit the ability to even pay the $60,000. I included a provision of a personal guarantee that was brought up, and a number of the board members that I've had discussions with felt comfortable with, and so that was included in your backup material. It's something that I don't believe at this time they are comfortable with, but that's a discussion for the school board to have as we move forward. They haven't missed a payment this year. They've done what they've asked to do. This personal guarantee would essentially be an insurance policy of the 90-day out clause. If they were to leave on a Friday and not come back on a Monday, it would give the district the opportunity to collect on that amount. If you take the $60,000 divided by 12, multiply it out, if you wanted to put verbiage in here not to exceed $15,000 or not to exceed $18,000, that's up to the board. But at this point, they would agree to the stipulations in the contract. I don't believe they're comfortable with the personal guarantee, but if that's something the board directs me to do, that's something that's their decision, I guess, at this point. They're not comfortable with more of a remittance. So at this point, I'll open it up to the board for motion, discussion, and directive.
Okay, we need a motion to approve the independent contractor agreement for the on-site child care. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion.
Was that motion with or without the personal guarantee?
That was just the contract agreement was without. But you can have the discussion.
Have the discussion.
Yeah, have the discussion. I mean, personally, I'll be the first one to speak up. I think, why wouldn't we want to have that personal guarantee line? What's the time?
It's standard procedure.
Yeah.
Standard procedure.
I think you put it on and amend the motion.
Others? I mean, I think it should be a minimum of 15,000 in 90 days.
No, I don't think why would we do that?
I don't think we need to add any number, because they opt out, like you say, they lost.
At least we're
It's going to
guaranteed.
be whatever their back rent is plus the 90 days anyway, so, I mean, it's,
Back in.
and these are typically, like you said, this is not out of the ordinary.
No.
They're never usually drafted with caps.
It's a business effort, not a handshake.
Exactly.
Do you want to
Okay,
amend the
so
motion?
amend the motion with the guarantee.
Personal guarantee.
Personal
independent
guarantee.
Contract agreement,
Okay.
inclusion with the contract.
So you have to.
I apologize, I didn't realize we were presenting without it, but yes, I will amend my motion.
And I will
To
amend the
include
second.
the personal guarantee.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Last? Aye. Mr. Kozol?
Aye.
Mr. Luchetti?
No.
Mr. Perkins?
Aye.
Mr. Costick?
Aye.
Mr. Lulo?
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari?
Aye. Approval of the 5-year strategic plan.
Well, we completed a draft of the brochure and looking for approval from the board this evening for the overall arching goals, action plan that was discussed in our strategic planning from back in December. Now, these are the board's goals. This is input from community members. We took time as an administrative team with the help of Dr. Madonia, thank you for coming out tonight, Bob, and crafted the goals to incorporate as much of the discussion as we could. The action plans were developed in accordance with the conversations that also took place and in accordance with the goals. As we move forward, these serve as our 2017-18 goals. We will wrap up our current set of goals in March. In February, in March, I would like to bring back then the detailed plan to the board in terms of some timelines and some specifics. You know, as you can imagine, Tim Riley already has his done. So we're in a really good place to bring back then the details to the board and set a course for the next 5 years. I'll take a couple of minutes and go over each one. If you have any comments and questions, we'll address those. We'll just start with curriculum assessment. Goal 1, continue to update pathways for college and career readiness to meet the needs of all students. So the action plans define and communicate career pathways for each department. Investigate and implement STEM-related courses and opportunities and develop a blended online learning environment in all content areas. A number of these we've already begun to develop, but it's good for us to have this on paper and continue to track our progress over time. Goal 2, enhance curriculum with innovative instruction assessment and the infusion of the social and emotional learning standards. So reaffirm and modify the current asset program for effectiveness in building social and emotional skills. Create a working list of courses and units where social and emotional learning standards are now implemented, and then determine where SEL concepts can be added to courses, and then proceed with that implementation. Go ahead.
So just for clarity.
Yes.
So we have the goals and we have the action plans underneath. We're going to build the 1,700 based on the action. We're going to detail out the action plans.
Yes, not only 17, 18, Chris, but some of these will be accomplished in 6 months. Some will be ongoing. So for each of these action plans, you're going to get details involving those plans, who's involved, and what the target dates of those are.
Okay.
And I think that's the important thing for looking at this and going on to the next step is those metrics, those timelines. And so, all goals are measurable.
Yes, and
so you know exactly what they are. Some of these are not.
But I guess my question then is, we engage the community to get to this point. We want to keep the community engaged going forward. So when do we go back and revisit? Do we
Next December.
Next December,
Yes.
we revisit the goals and say, are these still the goals?
Yes. Here's what we've accomplished. Here's what we anticipate for the next 6 to 12 months. Yes.
Is that accurate?
Go ahead.
I guess my question too is we need to do a 6-month pause to, because 12 months is a long time. And I just want to keep everybody engaged because I just felt that meeting and having spent together was so valuable.
Sure, well, let me respond to that. First, let me clarify that the action plans that you see in the brochure, obviously they're in a brochure, so they're a snippet of the detail that's been developed. And I've looked at all the action plans that the administrators have put together, and I'm extremely impressed with their depth, with their detail, and all of that. And they can all speak to that individually. What you see here is just a small snippet, summarization of what that is.
Okay.
We have built into the strategic planning process 12-month benchmark for progress and report out to the community committee. That's the annual review that we talked about during the process. We do that every 12 months, bring the committee back, report out progress in all these areas, and then of course continue with our growth with the rest of the plan. The plan has plenty of depth to go 5 years, because that's the whole purpose of it. We have, if for some reason we complete a goal, then we are ready to move up another, because we haven't prioritized. It's extremely organized, and I think it's a real compliment to you who have engaged in this process and engaged the community. As you probably saw from what Dr. Tingley shared with you, our survey had some very constructive feedback, but some very positive responses about what's going on in the district. The evaluation of the 2 days of planning was outstanding, was very positive. So I think that's a real plus for you as a board, that you've been given feedback, and that feedback is positive, which I think opens up the door for communication and for growth. And that's what this plan reflects. And so what I just want to say, it was a pleasure working with all of you and serving the district.
Just one question.
Any other questions you might
So
have?
just, so we had more, we had other,
There it is.
goals.
Sure.
I'm just asking where the house, we were more than just two goals per section.
They're ready to be rolled up as we accomplish, so is.
So we have the document,
Yes.
I haven't seen that yet.
Yes. So I still have the big papers. I mean, they're still in my. Yeah.
No, we never throw those away.
Yeah. No, they're there. We have the originals, and as we complete goals, then we bring it back and say, okay, number 3 here was this.
Yeah.
So we still have records of everything, and it was interesting in the meetings to, there was some combination of goals to come, it was tough to pick a 1, 2, and 3, so as you'll see, there's been some inclusion in these goals.
Right. Okay.
What do you mean by that?
Well, combining one goal and another. Combining.
That's what I was going to say. Are all the two goals under each one, were these all the top 2 that came out of the meeting?
Yes.
Yes. That's,
yeah. No, we didn't. They're all the top 2. Some were the top 2 with an inclusion then maybe of a number 3.
Maybe would we create a board doc that would show all of them, but with the top 2 or something, so it's.
We can develop that third bullet point, and that's something we can work through as we work through this.
When we had another item that was close in our vote count to another goal, where they were close, that's when we merged them together and blended them into one goal statement. So that's where you're seeing that blend, so that clearly the top 2 are what's in your document. And everything else is the depth of the remainder of the plan that still exists in the prioritization.
That we would look at.
That you'll look at as you go through the annual reviews. That's correct.
Look at, that's what I was asking about.
And Scott, as some of these take funding, how are we justifying our expenditures?
That's going to be tied. I mean, in the discussion of any technology goal, for instance, we're going to have to go down to the finance goal and say, how does that impact this goal? That's our yeah, because and that's a very, very good point.
So tonight you want us to approve this document?
Tonight it's the brochure, and it's the overarching goals and the overarching action plans. We will, over the next 2 meetings, bring back all of the 6 areas, 3 and 3, more of the details, have some discussion, have some exchange, and then those will become not only goals for the 17-18 school year, but then the next 5 moving forward. As we take one off, we take another. This will provide us a roadmap and kind of gives us a checks and balances as we move through this. Because some of the things that we've discussed in terms of we need to do this, we need to do that, it's in here, it's on here. And some of it is ongoing. It's things that we should do every single year.
So then I have two. One is the discussion of those detailed goals. I don't know, that just food for thought, that might be better suited as a separate Saturday morning meeting versus this meeting.
I thought about that too.
Just because that might require an hour of it, not just 20 minutes or 10 minutes of our time.
Right.
And then my next question then is, if we approve this tonight, then what? Do we, besides posting on our website, are we sending, how are we going to swing it to people?
Well, this email is going to be sent out first in the morning to all the members who served on the planning committee. So that'll be our first email tomorrow, and then Sharon's got the press release ready to go, and it'll be on our website, and we'll publicize this. As we go to our community events in the spring, as we always do, our chamber events and such, this is a great pamphlet to hand out so that people know, the intended course of the next several years.
Okay.
Just one little thing. Lincoln Way
Lake High School District 210. For Lincoln Lake Community High School
Yeah.
District 210, is there any way to get the community on there?
We can change that. Yeah. Good catch. Good catch.
And the parking lot items. Can you refresh my memory as to what happens to those?
Parking lot items basically were informational items that we collected during our 2 days of planning. And those items came up during our 7 hours of planning that were not necessarily pertinent to our discussion, but were valuable pieces of input that the committee was forwarding to the board. For example, as you know, we had 6 focus areas of study. If in the dialogue and the discussion something came up that was outside of those 6 areas, we respected that input and put it on what we call the parking lot. That parking lot information is just information to forward to the board as something that was brought up during our dialogue. So that's the purpose of parking lot. It's not meant to be part of the strategic plan, but is important information collected during our dialogue with the community committee.
Thank you.
And I think what I'm hearing over and over is we want to see maybe a longer version of this report.
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, you got it. We can get that and the parking lot and just distribute that out. Whoever might want it.
Okay, so we have a motion. May we please have a motion to approve the 5-year strategic plan brochure as
So moved.
presented?
Second.
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Informational items. Thank you, Mr.
welcome.
Dr. Odonia.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Informational item from Lincoln Lake Area Special Ed 843, Mr. Lewis.
Yes, I attended their meeting. A few things of note. Still, the SELF program is being housed in New Lenox. That'll be done at the end of the year as they're taking back their facility. So 157C or 159 is possibly looking to house the SELF program. It's 4 or 5 classrooms. So it's something I'll keep you updated as to what we're doing moving forward. As like us, they are also concerned about safety and security. Currently, they've had some trainers do the ALICE program, such as our people here have been trained. And sharing up that committee in our strategic plan here, we will continue to work maybe with both locations, since it is part of Lincoln Way, and make sure that the safety and security of all our students, whether it's here or the special ed district, are safe and sound. That concludes my report.
Thank you. FOIA requests.
FOIA requests were part of your backup materials, and for the past 30 days, our grand total was 6.
Thank you. Mr. Wilkie, Building and Grounds report, please.
Good evening, everyone. Hopefully everybody had some time to take a look at the operations and maintenance report. Again, this report basically just compares expenditures in the areas of utilities, purchase services, lawn care supplies from this fiscal year to the previous and comparing the previous fiscal year. Again, several of the values on the report are estimates, and they're in red. Estimates are reliable based on usage. And the report represents approximately $738,000 savings this fiscal year over the last fiscal year. The largest savings is in the area of electricity, mostly from Lincoln North. Natural gas costs. Well, let me back up. When we're talking about electricity, I also had mentioned in there that we had an issue with the cogen at Lincoln Lake East. We had a catastrophic failure of the reciprocating assembly, which is currently being rebuilt by Pat and Caterpillar, the factory authorized service representative for the union. It's imperative that we get this work done immediately, because it's also our backup generator. We're using it as cogen, but it's our sole backup generator, so we authorize the work and it's being completed as we speak. Before I move on to anything else, does anybody have any questions about the generator? should be wrapped up in about another week.
If we got in a bind though, Rich, Patterson Cat or somebody to bring out a portable or something if we needed, if something went down and we needed that backup that we don't.
If there were a situation where ComEd felt we would be without power for an extended period of time, and I mean over probably a day. Right now with the mild temperatures, the building would be okay for several days. But if we thought we were going to be without power for over 24 hours, that would call for a backup generator. Okay, back onto the report, natural gas costs are up, we believe, due to running the cogens. Also, December was pretty cold, so the usage was up in December as well, above and beyond what the cogens used. Water and service costs are up at Central, East, and West. We believe that's because of increased enrollment. Waste removal costs are lower due to the fact that we did go out to bid and got much better pricing. Cleaning service costs are higher at Central, East, and West due to additional staffs and the redistribution of some overhead costs. However, overall cleaning costs are down $99,500. Lawn equipment care costs are down overall, but continue to be slightly higher year-to-date at Central, East, and West due to the per occurrence billing in the new specification. That area should be in savings by the close of the fiscal year. Supplies and services accounts, again, we're just going to continue to monitor those at the high schools. Timing of invoices plays a pretty big role in that area. Also, unexpected mechanical failures such as the cogen at East. We'll see an increase in East in the upcoming months as we pay invoices for the repair of that generator. Overall, as far as the operations and maintenance report goes, it looks like we're making appropriate progress towards our original estimate of approximately $650,000 in savings for the closure of the school building. That we've saved approximately $398,000 at North, or 62% of the estimated savings have been realized in 50% of the fiscal year. Any questions before I move on to the boiler replacement?
Do you just want to spend a minute at the building and grounds, or building and finance meeting, sorry. We had a discussion about some of the analysis you're doing on the cogen. Do you just want to talk about that and what the potential paybacks are?
Sure. We had a meeting with the engineers from Midwest Energy on Tuesday, and preliminarily the results for our capacity charge were very positive. Their analysis to date estimates that in our next energy contract, over 3 years, we would be able to save around $500,000 collectively, district-wide, as a result of reduced capacity charges. And what that means is in the peak months of June, July, and August, when we're running our generators, those are also the times that they sample for capacity on the grid. And since our demand was lower, our capacity charge will be lower for the duration of the contract. There are several other areas. Capacity and transmission are the two areas that are based on that peak season. The other areas you could say are the energy charge, which means we can produce electricity cheaper than we can buy it for with the engine. That's the smallest savings. And then the demand. Demand charge comes through ComEd, and the way that works is that they sample your demand for the entire month, and the highest point of demand is how they calculate the charge. So if we're running our generators, we're shaving 700 kilowatts from our demand, so we would achieve that demand savings for the entire month if there's no issues. If the generator should have to be shut down for any reason during peak time, and for that, so we see that 30 minutes of higher demand, then we lose that demand savings for that month. So the demand and the energy are the two smallest areas of savings. capacity and transmission are the largest, and we've already achieved those. So now we're looking at a couple possible scenarios on how to run the generators. Should we just run in the peak season and not risk catastrophic failure of our backup generator during the winter, or should we run year-round? We're going to continue to crunch those numbers a little bit and come back with a report and come to finance and building committee, present the report, and are going to come to the board meeting and present the report.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we also discussed that some of those capacity savings are also going to be realized next year because of the lag and how it works, correct?
Capacity savings will be realized at the start of a new contract.
And a new contract next year.
Yeah, which would be next December. Boiler? Okay. We've talked about the incident we had at Central that took the hot water, domestic hot water and hot water heating boilers in the B wing out of service. We did have engineers and architects take a look at a couple of plans and also a vendor and the current equipment manufacturer. The first option, as was stated on the memo, was to replace the equipment at its current location with new equipment, smaller equipment that could be installed without removal of walls or cutting of the walls or roof. The price for that, conceptual budget for that would be $414,000. The second option was to expand the central main heating plant to pick up the load of that building. That would involve putting another boiler in the central boiler room, running piping all the way down to the north area. That's $690,000. And then the third was to repair the existing equipment. We had an estimate from the manufacturer and vendor contractor for about $150,000. That's reutilizing the vessel from those 3 units. The vessels are 47 years old. The maximum life expectancy of them is 50 years, according to our engineers. So I don't recommend option number 3, although it's the cheapest. I don't know if it's the most economical long term. We're taking a look at the first 2 options in a little bit more detail right now. We're going to do some construction, maintenance, and energy efficiency calculations over the life of the equipment, and I'll have a report for you at the Finance Committee meeting next month.
And I can tell you from the Finance and Building Committee, we had a unique opportunity to actually see where the central heating plant, we got a chance to walk over there. The committee's recommendation is actually not to consider 3 repairing the existing equipment because it's a 47-year-old boiler, life expectancy of, 47 to 50 years, so.
50 maximum.
Yeah, 50 maximum. Realistically, we're spending $150,000 for a 3-year fix. But we asked him to come back to us with both energy and efficiency so that we could develop a little bit of an ROI and go forward to that committee and then obviously then to the board here. Chris, am I forgetting anything?
No, I was just going to ask the question on has the insurance been completely figured out now on the temporary boiler? I mean, is insurance going to cover that cost for
we do have
as it's in place?
We do have a letter, an email and a letter from the insurance company acknowledging the claim and approving an initial advance payout for the claim.
And that includes because in the bills I did see that the initial billing with the setup and everything was in there, and then the first monthly charge. So insurance is going to continue to pay those.
Yes, they're going to pay for the initial billing, which was that large one. It was like $192,000. We've set up a loss account to track all the invoices related to that loss. As far as how many months of the rental boiler they're going to pay for, that's yet to be determined.
but the majority of the expenses as a result of the incident will be covered by insurance.
I just had one more, and I know we touched on this at the last meeting, but just to refresh my memory, option number 2, when expanding the central main heating plant, you had said that's when they installed, that was the one that was installed in the 90s and was designed in such a way that when this one did fail, that was set up in such a way that that's how it was meant to be replaced?
In fact, it was designed with the provisions to add a boiler to eliminate not only the steam boiler room, but the field house boiler. We have 6 hot water heating boilers in the building, and if we did go with that plan, ultimately we would have 3, and they would be centrally located here.
Gotcha. Yeah, so we have an estimated cost here that's been put together. Is this something that we would go out to bid with?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And another thing that was brought up at the Finance Committee is obviously with this is something that would have obviously triggered on our 10-year life safety that's coming up, that we're going to be getting back here shortly. And this is something that the Building and Finance Committee said that they want to try and get a long-term plan for these. We've already seen some layouts for roofs and asphalt. We've started talking about those. Let's try and put all these things together in a plan too.
And it's also one of the goals.
That's the number 1 goal.
Yeah.
Around 5 years.
So that's starting.
So adding boilers to the capital project.
Right. This one. And 11 pages of the other boilers and the other major assets we have there. My calendar.
Rich, with that 690 plan, would that be replacing the units from the 90s, or it's just a backup to those units, or would it replace?
There's currently 2 units in there that would be adding an additional unit.
But in terms of replacing the ones in the field house fund, is that your question?
My thing is, I mean, even though they're relatively newer, 20, 25 years old, obviously something maybe of today might be more energy efficient, and even though it's 690, is it cheaper to run something like that as opposed?
I've started on that, those calculations. I'll tell you right now that the energy efficiency of the 2 options is about the same. They're both more efficient than what we had, obviously, because the technology is much newer. But comparing option 1 to option 2, energy is not a real big factor. Maintenance and then future construction is where the savings is.
Are these the same systems that are in the other 4 buildings that if something failed here, we're looking at those possibilities at other locations?
Well, with the boiler, your life expectancy is 40 to 50 years, so yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
2016 audit findings review opportunity. This is a standing informational item.
Yeah, standing informational item, and I believe it's item 16, Kelly? Yeah, go ahead, tell me. Item 16, which we just covered in terms of the student activity accounts, the district activity. So that will be remedied this month, and it's something we continue to monitor moving forward. The other was the collateralization we had on in January. That will be completed in February as we continue to work with Old Second Bank to get that collateralization number prior to distribution of taxes this spring. And so that will be concluded in February.
So I would just note that on this report.
Yeah, we'll note that on the report. And then Chris, was there anything else we discussed this time around? I think those were the 2 main items.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
Community relations report. Rockwell.
Good evening. Just before winter break, Lincoln Way JROTC cadets participated in the Wreaths Across America event. The event was established to honor and remember veterans from each branch of the military, as well as the prisoners of war and those missing in action. Over 60 Lincoln Way cadets braved some of the coldest temperatures of the season while helping to unpack over 14,000 wreaths. I talked to Sergeant Shilka, and it was he said those kids were amazing, everyone was smiling, and I wish I had like the actual temperature. It was the coldest day in December, it was awful. And then December, Lincoln Way East girls basketball team held their annual Medieval Classic, featuring honorary chair Frankfurt Mayor Jim Holland. At the end of the 4-day tournament, the Griffins won the trophy that was, I believe, out of 8 teams, so they did very well. And then on January 10th, Lincoln Way Central Wrestling Team hosted a Battle for the Blue Phoenix to honor local law enforcement officers. Over 20 law enforcement officers attended and were thanked individually by the wrestlers. I know after it happened, a lot of the families came out of the stands and shook their hands as well, so it was a really cool event for them. And they sent a really nice thank you note, so it was awesome. On Thursday, January 12th, over 70 Lincoln Way West students gathered to celebrate their Illinois State Scholar status. The requirements for consideration to become an Illinois State Scholar are ACT and/or SAT scores, unweighted GPA, and class size, and only approximately 10% of all Illinois high school graduates are named state scholars, so that was a great accomplishment for the Warriors.
Thank you very much. Great things going on in the district. Legislative report.
Legislative report found in your backup materials. Legislative report. There's going to be more action next week in Springfield. Obviously, you know that. Some things contained in your legislative report at this time. That way, Mr. Kirk. Biggest thing in adjustment to the budget, there's discussion of property tax freeze, revenue enhancements, and then pension reform, school funding reform. Those are the 4 biggies that would impact us. Property tax freeze, they've gone from discussion of 0% for a number of years, now maybe 1 or 2 years. If we were a district sitting where we are today with our budget where we are right now, looking at a $1 to $4 million surplus, and not in the short-term borrowing game, we would be okay with a 1, possibly 2-year property tax freeze. At the 0.6.7 CPI, we're talking $600,000, $700,000 now, $700,000. Certainly that's compounded. We're trending towards a 2% CPI. That would be a loss of over $1 million for our district. As I said, if we weren't in the game of the short-term borrowing and we were starting our fiscal year with 25% reserves, we could sustain for a year or maybe 2 years. But because of where we sit today, a reduction of additional property tax would put us at a situation of break even or just above break even. And as we've discussed, one of our primary goals has to be to pay off those tax anticipation warrants to get out of the business of borrowing. In fact, I just received today from one of our financial, a different financial analyst, that interest rates are going to continue to tick up. That's something we anticipate happening. And when you're borrowing $20 to $23 million, that incremental increase is substantial. So, in summary, the property tax freeze is something we're going to have to very closely monitor. We'll have to get our opinions to our legislators, which I've done. Obviously, they know where we stand on that. It would be difficult for municipalities. The response is, well, you can always go to referendum, and that puts all of your local agencies against one another at referendum. Your fire protection district, your villages, your grade schools, your high schools. Not a good scenario. So something we'll continue to monitor. I know there will be discussion when they're back in Springfield next week on the property tax. Any comments or questions regarding that provision?
So you would encourage us to contact our local legislators?
I would, and I will continue to communicate with you once they get to, once they get to the floor and they decide kind of which direction it's going to go. At this time, it's been discussions. They've gone from discussions of a permanent to now maybe a 1 to 2 year, but it's something we'll continue to monitor. In terms of revenue enhancements, there's discussion of a personal income tax increase. Once again, not surprising, something that we may see, but certainly something that's going to be discussed. Pension reform, with There's movement of the Tier 1, Tier 2, TRS. There's penalties for districts if employees exceed the CPI. And then I would have to get written information in terms of when is that grandfather clause in. Currently, our teachers that have put in for retirement receive a 3% increase. That's obviously exceeded CPI. What would the penalty be for a school district, or would it be grandfathered in as things have been done in the past? But that's something we'll continue to monitor. School funding reform, there's been quite a bit of discussion, but nothing concrete at this time. And so once again, that's something we will continue to monitor. There'll be a lot of activity next week. I'll keep you apprised of any developments, but I do anticipate a busy week in Springfield next week. That concludes my legislative report.
Thank you. Policies, first reading.
Number of policies. In fact, it's the biggest in press history. I apologize. It is the first reading. I'll be happy if you have any questions, you can get those to me and we can have those addressed. But policies of note, policy 2125, which is the new state mandate. I placed a resolution to regulate expense reimbursements. That's a new policy to confirm that board members are volunteers. And so districts are asked to adopt a resolution to set limits. Obviously, the state convention is an appropriate expense. Going to Three Rivers an appropriate expense. I did a survey of what some other districts would do as their per diem limit. Superintendents in Will County met. The consensus was $800 a day. I think that's way too high. And so, exactly. So I think I'm right. Yeah, I think you think I'm right there. What I recommended in the resolution, once again, it's a first reading. It would be not to exceed $250 per day, and that would be for travel, meal, lodging, and that would be, effective of the adoption. It has in here January 19th. It was an automatic date. It would be adoption of the next. But it's also, we put in there some administrative procedures manual for filling out those requests. And then the policy included in the draft policies is written by press. The resolution we just wrote ourselves. Also, policy of note would be policy 2261, which would be the independent inspector general policy. The appointment, we had discussed this, so this is a 3-page policy that would be an addition or in lieu to our uniform grievance procedure. Employees, students, parents, guardians may file a written complaint with the appointed inspector general concerning waste, fraud, financial management, or other employee or board issues within the district. This answers, I believe, in part, some of our audit findings in terms of fraud protection and intervention. It gives a separate avenue that's not related to a school employee or supervisor. The employment, I would recommend it to the school board. Qualifications would be a Juris Doctorate from the accredited law school, 10 years experience in Illinois school law or federal, state, or local government experience as an attorney or a judge. Prior experience managing and completing investigations involving allegations of fraud, theft, deception, or conspiracy. Not possess a personal or business relationship with any school board member. Remuneration would be an hourly rate, which would be determined by the board upon approval, and then revisited every June. If the next June we don't agree to another, the rate stays the same. You have the complaint procedures in there. Investigation reports and summaries would go back to us. However, where the copy gives disciplinary action against an employee or report makes recommendations concerning, there are provisions in the FOIA law, the Open Meetings Act, FOIA law, that would keep some of this confidential. And that way the investigation itself has the opportunity to get to the conclusion. So I would just ask you to review this before the next meeting. Reports to outside agencies if the independent inspector general determines that a possible criminal act has been committed. They would contact the police department, county state's attorneys, locations where the crime was believed to have occurred, and then confidentiality, investigatory files, investigative reports prepared shall be confidential except as enumerated in this section and subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So take some time, review these. If you have any questions, let me know. What we'll do then, we will go back in between now and then and get this group of policies, which is 31 something. So we'll get these policies ready to go to be transferred over to board docs. And it's our goal over the next 4 to 6 months to have everything then put into the database form and put into board docs so that it's searchable, much more friendly usage, but it's going to take a little bit of time for us to do, but we're going to do it policy at a time. We'll get these from press, and then we'll start a section at a time working through. We get a new press packet every 3 months, so we will have another one here about a month and a half, 2 months after these are approved, and we'll have another set.
Scott, on the PDF document with the policy changes and edits, there's several comments which are helpful that say KAS number 1. Who's KAS?
Help me out here on my notes? Or
No, yeah, the notes,
That's
she's talking about the
policies.
superintendent's notes, revisions to policy administrators. I think.
No, yeah.
The worksheets. The
The
worksheets.
red line.
Yeah, the worksheets.
Yeah. I think
It's
that's...
not
That's
somebody,
probably-
it's not somebody internal.
No, it's not somebody internal.
Okay, that's all I wanted, okay, it's from
No.
press, okay, fine.
Yeah, that's from
I
press.
just thought it was one of our, somebody was helping us with that, okay.
Is that, do we know, when we talk about and I think it's a great idea, the independent inspector general, do we have an idea of what that's, because we're going to probably have to budget something out there. That's the scary part about doing that, because that budget can go really crazy.
That is, and that's the other discussion with the individual as we begin this, and there's a provision in there that they're willing to, they're able to say, no, this isn't something we even are going to investigate. So they will be able to discern what is something they need to move forward with and what would be something that they
Sure,
shouldn't.
and
So I guess the question would, in our arrangement or agreement with that individual or business, we could say, we need to be notified after 10 billable hours.
Right, and I want to give them the independence, but at the same hand, I don't want to get a gotcha on the budget.
Yeah, and that's why.
And that's where you got.
That's why
it's a
we
hard one to
would
call.
want to go with a credible firm that would use, some consideration on what they would move forward with and what they wouldn't. That's a very good point.
Asset of the month.
Asset of the month, 4.
Okay. There you go, Scott.
Sorry, I'm using my, I gotta use one of these fancy math computers. Yeah, I don't have Google on my machine. Don't worry about it, we're almost there. Okay, asset of the month.
Please bear with us.
I didn't print that out.
No, I got you right now. Social competencies, empathy, young person has knowledge of and comfort with people of different cultural, racial, ethnic backgrounds at home. Teach your children about their heritage, go as a family to events that celebrate different cultures and religions at school. Model acceptance and appreciation of differences, and I think that's something we've improved on. Don't tolerate racism, bias, or prejudice. And in the community, include the images and voices of a variety of people in community publications, advertisements, posters, and promotional materials. Great.
Thank you.
Superintendent's report?
Yes, that's where we're at, yes.
Okay. Pride of Lincoln Way is in your backup materials. No, go ahead and keep that. I'll let you do that on your own. One of the things that I would like to discuss, and something we will bring back in February, and I will provide information ahead of time, we've begun to accumulate fees from various districts similar to ours. Student fees is something we like to discuss and get approved in February as we move into March. last year, we had the issue with driver's ed and the cost of that. We don't have that this year, but we certainly want to compare our fees to other schools. One of the things Tim and I are going to talk about and give a price to the district is that every student taking the PSAT, I think it's $10 or $12 a student is kind of what we're looking at. So that's something I'd like to discuss with the board, but we'll have a student fee comparison. At the same time, and we can kind of put this with board comments, we are financially, we're tracking our expenditures where they need to be. Last month, I shared kind of a look at where we thought we would be with our salaries next year. What Rich and I, with the help of our interim business managers, we're going to do large chunks of categoricals for you in terms of categories. Here's our utilities. Here's what we spent the first 6 months. Here's what we think that cost will be for a year next year. Here's where we are with our cleaning contracts. Here's where we are with our waste management, our larger accounts. We are looking differently at the way we're going to do our budgeting. In terms of, in the past, we've done allotments. The principals get an allotment. The different department chairs didn't get that amount. We're going to go a little bit differently in terms of, okay, here's what they spent this year. What do they need next year? What do we? And this must be done over the next several years. Now, the majority of our budget, we know, salaries and benefits. Next year, we have a pretty good idea of that number. The following year, we don't currently have a contract in place. So as all of these things in Springfield occur, that's something that will have a tremendous impact upon our revenues, which then impact those expenditures. So, Mr. Kirkey's right. Where are we in terms of our budget? In terms of our expenditures, we have a pretty good handle on next year. If gas rates stay similar, some of our major service contracts are already in place. With some retirements, our salaries are under control. We're in pretty good shape with our insurance benefits. What we don't know is what impact Springfield may have. Sitting here today, I can tell you right now, if there's no property tax freeze and there's hold harmless on state funding, we're sitting at a nice surplus. We would be in the neighborhood of $3 million. Now, property tax freeze, changing the funding formula, the pension shift starts to occur. We're going to be in that break even to a slight surplus, and that's a tough spot for us to be in when this year we know we're going to be close to $23 million from the bank and counting on insurance to keep coming through. That's not something I want to count on next year. We're a couple triplets, we're a couple multiples away from that fund balance starting to go the other way. And that happens here. I mean, it just happens. And so from a budgeting standpoint, we'll get some of the major expenditures. We'll know more next week, kind of, at least I think we'll start to get a flavor from Springfield in terms of where we're going. But status quo, as you saw from Mr. Hyman's presentation a couple months ago, we've stabilized the day-to-day. The fact that we have the $5 million in capital helps us over the next 3 years. But as Rich and I have been discussing, as soon as we get that life safety, we've got to get a plan together. And after that $5 million is spent, we have to have a plan then to have that $1.5 million every year to keep the plan going. So by the time that $5 million is gone, we need to have $2 million surplus that we're putting against our TAWs plus $1.5 million that can go towards the capital improvements. How do we get there? Well, we'll have to continue to be diligent with the expenditures. We can't rely on hope. We're going to have to plan as we go through. Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, expanding on what Joe said, getting the budget as quickly as we can, but not only the 1 year, but we have to look out 3 and 5 years and be able to have those numbers in front of us. So when we find out what Springfield's doing, we can do a what if and kind of look at it. And I don't think, the position we're in with negative fund balances, we have to run a surplus. There's no,
Yes.
there's no other way to go about this, and it has to be done. And that's why we didn't have it in there, but I'd also like to talk about 4.2, the one I had asked for
Yes.
last time on fund balances, and it's also part of the strategic plan. So we've got to start talking about what, we have to have a goal on what our surplus is going to be, because that's the only way to get out of it.
Yeah, I think we need to target not only a dollar amount, but then the percentage, you're right. And the press policy has the same paragraph that we have. I've looked at Lockport, I've looked at District 230. Their verbiage is very similar to one another, but they're not in the same situation we are. So we will tailor one that meets our needs in terms of getting out of the annual deficits, which we have done, but I still think that's a goal. We can't afford to run any type of deficit, and we need to set a benchmark for those surplus.
And just on that press one, in the footnotes, they do have language that we could utilize in our positions.
Right. Yes. And I think it's important too, as we talk about the finance committee meeting, is, that plan we're putting together with the life safety that's coming up this next month, and looking at long-term, expenses that we're going to have with our campuses, all four of them, it's important. But I mean, as just a general board comment, a little off topic, but a little more rosy, was one thing that just impressed me was this one that Tim very quickly said, we're #1 safest school. And that doesn't happen overnight, and that doesn't happen from up here. That happens from everybody in this room and everybody not in this room. And honestly, I would like to just thank families and the community, because that does not happen just here at Lincoln Way, and our teachers.
What are we gonna have next week? What are we gonna have next month?
Thank you.
I'm gonna wrestle Steve Langer after this meeting today. No, we put something together last year for the state when they came in. They did a more extensive review. We have a meeting with them next week for our six-month visit. And so I'm going to go back to that document. I'm pretty sure it tracks pretty close to where we are today. And I'll have something for you in February.
Well, I wouldn't suggest that I get a discussion more. I'd love to see us give it the time to serve on a Saturday morning or something.
We can be discussed, it's just everything he said prior to that comment is the exact reason we needed it in February. Because there's so many moving parts
March or
there.
April, I'm just saying that in terms of, it'll be a board in the public's
There-
home. But it just, I'm
workshop.
just
It's just a draft.
more of a workshop, right, but if
Yeah,
we
we're
drop
at.
and have a workshop to talk about it, and give it the time.
He brought up state issues, he brought up interest rates, he brought up contracts that are 2 years out. I mean, it's all more reason to, I know we're focused on the day-to-day, but to Chris's point, we've got to look up the 15.
But
And I think we are.
Christine is suggesting that we have a Saturday board workshop where we're talking about these goals, where we're talking about the financial
Well, these
plans and.
this financial discussion goes right in line with the goals, because
Right.
we're talking about an annual long-range look, look at where we think we are. And like I said, we can come up with the different scenarios based on where we are today, and then a number of what ifs.
Right.
They're pretty round numbers. I mean, yeah.
And then just let's get them on paper and let's have that discussion. But I want to hear from the board members if you'd be willing to come in and devote a Saturday morning to sitting down and looking at this document and going over the goals rather than doing it till 9:30, 10 o'clock on a Thursday night. I mean,
I'll sign up for it.
okay, so if we can get
Send out some Saturdays.
some Saturday dates and come up with a plan in that regard. Okay, I think we're on to general board comments. Any other general board comments?
No, just, I said, Chris, we have the 3 Chamber of Commerce events coming up. Did that go all the way around the room?
I guess that go around this way.
Okay.
You done?
I am done.
Just quickly, Dr. Tingley, thanks for bringing us into 2017.
As you can tell, I left myself behind. I gotta get Google on the computer.
Well, no, I've only had a few days. I was out of town last week, but just a few days working with 4 docs. We're not killing trees. It's all right there in front of us. Mrs. Stone for getting it all implemented and attached in. Dr. Murphy, the password does work, thank you. But it's just kind of reassuring to know that we're moving forward, and sometimes going outside your comfort zone. I mean, board packets have always been a thing, we've always done it, it's always there, but this is a little different. There's probably going to be some pickups the next few meetings, but I think sooner or later we'll be to where we need to be, so thank you.
I agree, and I think the biggest thing is I think the public will see it as they're able to look in and see exactly what we're seeing. It's going to be absolutely phenomenal.
So the plan, just so the public can know, so the items that were approved this evening will then be put into the public view at some point tomorrow morning, certainly by the middle of the day. And so some of the items, if you had gone, were already on there. You know, some of the items were. Some of the items then, once approved this evening, will be updated and put into that view. There will be a connection then to the recording of the board meeting as well. And so everything will be in one place.
Thank you. Any correspondence for the board? Anybody? No? Moving on to closed session. May I have a motion to go into closed session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of employees, collective negotiating, establish sale or lease price of real estate, and litigation. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you.
Who's the second?
Roll call, please.
Yes. Mrs. Lutz?
Aye.
Mr. Kozel?
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti?
Aye.
Mr. Turkey?
Aye.
Mr. Costick?
Aye.
Mr. Lulo?
Aye.
Mrs. Molinari?
Aye. Thank you all for attending tonight.